Hi folks, welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me on the show I have John Heller, who needs no introduction really, I'm sure. Been on the show many times, John, but it's actually been a little while since we have done anything, so welcome back.
Good to be back, Tony.
It's always great to talk with you because you're a powerhouse of knowledge. And I will let you have plenty of free reign, I think, today. I know
somebody once recently described me as an aggregator of information, and I thought, no, I'm an aggritator. So
as long as you're not an alligator.
Yeah, I guess,
All right.
Never sure what species I am,
Okay,
I identify as white male.
Oh, you can identify as whatever you want, and that'll be fine, I'm sure, in today's day. So, well, John,
I'm sure you heard at Lakewood Church, Joel Osteen's church, I use the scare quotes, in Houston, they had a shooter come in.
A trans.
And she was supposedly... had a pro-Palestinian thing on the rifle, and her social media post very anti-Semitic. And then she identifies, I don't know if it was a he identifying as a she or she trying to be a he, or I can't keep it straight anymore.
Yeah.
But
I think born male was, yeah.
Oh, was it born male?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then she came in looking like a female.
So
it's just the whole world is insane. I mean, we see this all over the place.
Absolutely. So I know you've been looking into the whole, what went down at Davos with the World Economic Forum. Maybe we could start there.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that was interesting about Davos was the title. The title this year was Rebuilding Trust. And after watching a lot of the sessions, and I'm not even scratching the surface yet, but I've watched a lot of the sessions. And I think that what they should have titled it was Rebuilding Trust in the Plan We're Shoving Down Your Throat.
Yeah.
Because they sort of left the plan they're shoving down our throat off of the title. And a lot of this and it was very interesting what they did too, Tony. One of the things they did was they invited a few people that they knew would be completely contrary to them. So, for example, they had a guy from the Heritage Foundation here in the United States named Eric, I think his name is Eric Roberts. And he got on stage and he just lit them up. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the clip of it, but he said, you guys are the problem. You're the elites. You don't care about us. You've got this plan to drag down society, and you're well on your way to doing that. You don't care about us. And you give the Chinese Communist Party, a platform. And he said, I saw an interview with him after that. I don't know where it was. Maybe it was on Glenn Beck or someplace. But he said there were people in the front row when he's talking that are literally melting down as he's speaking. So I'm pretty sure that was by design, that they brought him in. And they brought in, for example, the president of the new Argentina president, Milei, who is kind of I don't know, I guess he's very different among world leaders. And I think he's claiming he's going to convert to Judaism. But he came in and he lit them up also. You crazy global elites, you don't have any of our interests at heart. How dare you? So the result of it was that it gave them credibility to say, well, see, we're very open-minded here. We have people that we don't agree come in. But part of it was, I think, to dampen the other subjects that were talked about at Davos, particularly in the area of artificial intelligence. So I've been watching this artificial intelligence, and I think we've talked about it a little bit over the past year.
Yeah.
And, it was just a year ago that I was was invited by the Israeli government to attend the Christian Media Summit in Jerusalem in December of 2022. And during one of the talks, there was a business guy named Jonathan Medved. He's an entrepreneur, venture capital type guy in Israel. And he was talking about, hey, there's this thing called ChatGPT. And I have to be honest with you, because of traveling and everything, I had not heard of it. He says it's just rolled out. It's already hit 1 million downloads. But this is the growth of this in the last year and what's going on it's very concerning. And I think when we look at it from a Bible prophecy standpoint, I think we can see a lot of things that we would be looking for in terms of the technology of the mark of the beast and the technology that will be employed in this last period of human history. And it's coming very, very, very quickly. So a few months ago, I think it was early September, it was around September 7th or 8th in India, they had the G20 meeting. And at the G20 meeting, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the head of the European Union, I believe the unelected head of the European Union, at least unelected by the masses, she came out at that G20 meeting and said, we need to have digital ID. And at the time, they were using all of this terminology about digital public infrastructure. As I've sort of traced that forward, just this past week, there's a blog called The Sociable by Tim Hinchcliffe, I think is his name. And he wrote a thing about, we have this intelligence, it's sort of like the DARPA research, the intelligence usage, the data usage side of DARPA, and it's called IARPA. And they've released, specifications about people of what they want to do, which is to essentially track everybody and everything and everybody's movement and put it into databases that are accessible by the IC or the intelligence community. So this was sort of a big theme at Davos. One of the sessions they talked about the development of quantum computing. Now, I don't know that they're there yet on quantum computing, which will completely change everything. Right now in computer chips, they're sort of reaching they can't really make the chips much smaller. So some companies like are in artificial intelligence, NVIDIA, they have a chip that's essentially that they're selling. They can't make enough of them. And it's about the size of an iPad. And at least the initial specs on it were that it contains at least 200 billion transistors on this chip the size of an iPad, 200 billion. But they're reaching a physics limit. But everybody's saying, well, if we can go to quantum computing, which almost takes the whatever they have in the physics level, and expands it out into sort of a multidimensional thing, the computing power goes up millions of times very, very quickly. And at one of the, when we talk, you and I know you talk about black swan events. And who was it? The CBS reporter that Catherine Herridge, I think is her name, she used to be with Fox. She came out early in the year when they were doing like, what do we expect in 2024? And she said, I think we could have a black swan event. Now, she was very nonspecific about it, just that this could be a very devastating event for a lot of the world. So in the Davos forum, you can look it up and get the video. There was a session called Quantum's Black Swan. One of the panelists is an executive with IBM. And she said, well, I know one of the questions you want to ask is this, are we heading for some kind of technological Armageddon? And she said, yes, we are. But, we're working on algorithms to work around that particular problem, because what quantum computing would do is would be so powerful that it would be able to compute and break every encryption code ever devised on the planet, which means there's no security. So when you couple the quantum desire with the making everything digital, and everything digital being about all of our data, I've mentioned this many times before, I'm sure with you, you go 15 minutes from my house and Facebook has 6 giant buildings that are each It's like the Empire State Building laying on its side in a field, 6 times 6. Google across the way has spent, I believe, $6 billion building server farms. Another company that does cloud computing is coming in, and they're going to spend like $1.5 to $2 billion building a couple of buildings. And Amazon has server farms all over town here in central Ohio. And they have one built and are in the process of building another one. Tony, I've traveled around the country a lot, including Southern California and the Inland Empire, where they have, like Ontario, California is like a town of trucking warehouses. This is the largest single trucking warehouse I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to build another one. So they have a lot of, so when she's talking about technological Armageddon and that it seems to be inevitable, then you start to wonder, when we look at some of these prophecies that talk about control, about tech, which appears to be based on technology and what we call the mark of the beast, you can really see a lot of these things starting to come together. Patrick Wood, I don't know if you know Patrick or not, he writes a lot on technocracy. Yeah. And I've known Patrick for probably 15, 16 years at least. And he was telling me the same thing then, but he made a comment recently, and he said, when they're ready to roll out this, so those of us who are futurists, we believe that there's this future end period of history. Some call it the 70th week, some call it the tribulation, some call it the Great Tribulation. But, there's a bunch of different names, and we all disagree about what's what. Yeah. But he says, there's a point in that period where the person known as the Antichrist and the person known as the false prophet will implement this mark of the beast technology. Patrick made, I think, a very astute comment, is that when this happens, it's not going to be that the Antichrist and the false prophet get together one day and they say, okay, is there something that we could do to control humanity and sort of force humanity to worship you, Mr. Antichrist beast? And Patrick's point was, they won't have to go out and crowdfund it to get it, and raise capital. It will already be in place, and they'll just flip the switch. Yeah. And I really think we're at that point that's going to happen. I also ran across, in researching these things, by the way, everybody puts these wonderful PDF reports out there, very slick, very well done, but everybody's doing it. And if I ever printed them out, I couldn't afford to print them out. There's so many of them that come across my desk or my computer anymore. I've already got a storage space on a pretty large hard drive MacBook. But Ian Bremmer did a TED Talk about 7 months ago. And in it, and we always argue in Bible prophecy, what are these what are this final beast empire that comes about that's prophesied in Daniel and Revelation? What's that made of? Is it, European countries? Is it Middle Eastern countries? And I'm increasingly of the idea that it's probably part of that, but some of these tech giants are really, really getting large. Mm-hmm. I mean, these companies are growing exponentially. I mean, NVIDIA, if you invested $10,000 in NVIDIA 12 years ago, you would be worth billions now. Their stock went up, I don't know, by 2.5 or 3 times last year because of the artificial intelligence. And so now they wield a tremendous amount of power. And so in his talk at TED Talk, he talked about the multipolar world, the Eastern countries and the Western countries and the conflict. But he said there's a third one coming, and that's the technological aspect of this new world order. And so I think it's sometimes in Bible prophecy, it's not one of these things that, when I first started studying Bible prophecy and listening to people, nobody really talked about that. But now these companies are so big, so powerful, so controlling. And so when I look at Facebook here, you go out to their server farm and it's 6 buildings, and all the buildings are racks and racks and racks of computers that are storing, ones and zeros of our data. It takes that much, and the interconnections between them. So I think the notion of privacy is pretty much gone now in the world, particularly if you do anything online or anything like that. And that's okay. I mean, I don't think people are selling out by having a digital presence, but we also need to know that there's, I think, a very dark side to what's coming in that regard.
You also look at the World Economic Forum and things, and you have Larry Fink from BlackRock,
right,
on the board and stuff. And so there's trillions of dollars going through BlackRock, for example. And
right.
You've just got 3, BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. The amount of the wealth that goes through those 3 alone, that's part of the whole control thing. Because, you've got these people, like I say, on right in there like this with Klaus Schwab,
Right. Well, and then you get a guy like Larry Fink at BlackRock. And he said a few years ago, I'm sure you've seen the clip where he says, well, we're doing this on the financial side so we can force people to behave a certain way. That's my paraphrase of what he said. And it's very true. And they, for example, they put in a lot of things on diversity, equity, inclusion, became a big thing. It was really pushed, I think, through some think tanks, mainly one that the Saudis run called the Financial Future Investment Initiative Institute, FII Institute. And they have a big sort of Davos type conference each year. I think it's coming up soon. So there are 4, by the way, there are 4 big conferences where this is done. There's a World Economic Forum at Davos. There's the World Government Summit, which I think is going to be in the next couple of weeks, if not next week, in Dubai. And then there's the FII Institute, the Saudi one. They call it Davos in the desert. And then there's the St. Petersburg SPIEF or SPEIF, Economic something Forum.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. I can't think of the name exactly either.
It's a big Russian one, and they get all the same people go to all these conferences. You'll see them over and over again. So I think it's important, if you're a futurist and you want to know what's going, you pay attention to these conferences, because they don't hide what they're doing anymore. No. I mean, if they're not subtle about it, it's all online. You can go find it. I mean, the World Economic Forum has that strategic intelligence part of its website where they show how everything is interconnected. And it's very easy to drill down, and it's very easy to get on there to start looking at what they're doing, what they're talking about, their research, what backs them up, and to literally spend, all of a sudden you realize I've been here for 4 hours looking at all of this stuff and how it's interconnected. And I've only scratched the surface on a couple topics.
Well, I'm just thinking, so often you hear the word compliance used these days, and that brings me to another thing, is like you mentioned that they're trying to rebuild trust, the World Economic Forum, because, everyone's sick of Klaus Schwab. And
why would they? I guess they destroyed it, maybe?
Yeah, well, and people don't trust them. But the other side, too, is that I see, Bill Gates out there trying to rebuild trust in the vaccine technology and talking about, well, if people don't have needles to worry about, then we'll be able to introduce these new fancy vaccines with patches, so that then that'll get everyone trusting them again, and everyone will want to be vaccinated for everything from, everything you can think of, from the common cold to HIV to, every single thing they want to supposedly vaccinate people against, which is just crazy as well. But the amount of trust that was destroyed over, well, we don't need to say exactly, but you know what I'm talking about. with the last round rollout. No one wants them anymore.
No, and one of the things they even talked about was sort of doing them like an aerosol, like through the air.
Yeah,
you could get your vaccine that way. So the technology is changing. By the way, Gates was at Davos. He did a number of interviews, panels. I think he has a YouTube channel now. If you can stand it, I mean, it's there's a certain level to how much I can tolerate. But he was there interviewing Sam Altman from OpenAI, who's one of the big guys at OpenAI, and he said, listen, folks, you need to understand that what we have right now in terms of artificial intelligence, this is the stupidest these things will ever be, which is should get everyone a good bit of pause to think about where this is heading. And it's very much, Tony, to me, it's, the first sort of global revolt against God was the Tower of Babel in Genesis. And it seems like that now we're doing the same thing because they're talking about, I mean, they're very open about altering people's DNA and genes, sort of taking CRISPR technology and artificial intelligence and altering things. And they've made tremendous progress on that. So by the way, on artificial intelligence, to show how powerful it is, I think 60 Minutes did a thing of 4 or 5 months ago on artificial intelligence. They had a guy on who talked about the three-dimensional structure of biological proteins. There's about 200 million of them that control life. And so one of the things they had always wanted to do was determine the three-dimensional structure of the proteins so that they could then introduce something to alter those proteins to control and shape life. The rule of thumb used to be that it would take one researcher with a PhD 5 years full time to determine and map out the three-dimensional structure of one protein. As they've been developing this artificial intelligence over the last few years, they were able, it took them a couple of years, but then they were finally able to devise programs to map out these biological proteins. And once they figured that out after a couple of years of work, they can literally, they've now done all 200 million biological proteins. And they were able to do them in a matter of weeks. So 1 billion years of PhD research time has now been reduced down to weeks or days. That's very sobering because we know that these people are not acting in our best interests. No. And so just last week, of course, the first chip was Neuralink, and it's already, there's another company that's already done a couple, but Neuralink finally put its chip in the brain of a human being. And now I'm seeing that they're coming out with artificial 3D printed brain tissue to insert people. This is very, very concerning to me. So again, I think if we sort of go back to it, it's sort of Babylon, the Tower of Babel revisited.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony, right now, as part of my ministry and trying to help keep people informed, to summarize things, I subscribe to a lot of newspapers. And so I know that I have a great love for Israel. I know they're not perfect. I have a lot of friends there. I've been there many times. And so I read Israeli and Arab newspapers about the conflict going on in Gaza right now. But I can sit at my desk and I can read all these Arab newspapers from all over the Middle East because I can translate them through Google Translate or other tools. And I can even translate Arabic speakers. I mean, I see on Twitter now, people will put up a video and it'll be English. But then if you look down in the comments, people are posting the translation of what that person said in a different language.
Mm.
And this leads to a lot of things. So the other topic, and I know we're running out of time here, but the other topic that was sort of at the fore in the introduction, the lead up to the Davos conference, they have a thing that they put out, which is called the Global Risk Report. You can download it and look at it. And what was it when they did the launch a day or two before Davos started? The emphasis was the biggest problem in the world is information or disinformation and misinformation.
Mm.
And I thought, I'm sitting there watching these people from Davos who call their thing rebuilding trust. And the biggest purveyors of misinformation and disinformation in the world are now telling me we need to be warned about misinformation and disinformation. And I kind of think that they don't think that what they're telling us is disinformation or misinformation. It just was kind of ironic. The biggest purveyors of it are the ones that are now warning us about misinformation and disinformation.
Well,
I think
basically misinformation and disinformation to them is anything that goes against what they're saying. So therefore you can't have a contrary opinion and without it being potentially being shut down. Or they may have some token ones, like they invite to Davos, like you just said, but it'll only be because of the Hegelian dialectic and their way of controlling both sides, I believe. They want to, have both sides of the argument controlled so that they can still steer it where they want it to go. So people like you and me down the track will face the very real threat of being shut down, I believe.
Yeah, well, you make a good point there about the Hegelian dialectic, okay? Because, and I can't remember which one it was. I saw a video, and it was a video of someone, a very famous person speaking in another language with the accent of the language. Like it was like a foreign person. I can't remember who it was, but you're going to see these fake videos.
Yeah. And
it was very difficult to tell. And so now the problem with the Hegelian dialectic, it used to be, like black and white. Now it's going to be the same person is going to be telling you both sides of the issue and confusing you even more. That's probably the most sinister thing. And when you see it, so with the war in Gaza, what I've seen now is that so the people that don't like Israel, of which there are many, they will say, well, show us a video. And so then you'll show them videos and they'll say, well, that's a fake video. So they're not going to accept it anyway. So you can't convince anybody of anything, which only leads to more and more polarization. And you don't know, and frankly, it's hard to know who to believe. Now, I know who to believe. It's Jesus Christ. That's the only solid rock that we have. But it's a difficult world to navigate. So, and I'll confess, it's depressing and it's kind of scary at times.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that bothers me, and I do see it even amongst people that I respect, but is people that will present something that's not necessarily the truth, but they'll present it as being totally defendable as a truth, and yet something isn't. Well, like, for example, I won't go into a lot of details, but like I did an article and a video several years ago, pretty much, I believe, debunking the fact that Albert Pike never wrote a 3 World Wars letter. I don't believe there was any 3 World Wars letter before William Guy Carr wrote his book in the 50s. So there'd already been 2 world wars, and you get a whole trail of things that go back to a hoax from Leo Taxil in the 1800s, but there was nothing in Taxil's hoaxes about 3 world wars. But anyway, you build this narrative up so that there's now this is what's happening in Israel and the Palestinian thing. It's all because of, Albert Pike's prediction, and that's what they want to do. They want to create 3 world wars and stuff. But, the point is, I don't believe there ever was. Sorry?
Well, I find it very interesting that you did that because you have done a lot of work on Freemasonry and that
Oh
type
yeah,
of thing.
yeah. I totally believe Albert Pike was a wicked man, and he was
Sure.
definitely 33rd degree Freemason. But I don't believe he ever wrote any 3 World Wars letters, and I think I pretty much proved it. But then there are so many people out there that are still spreading that as if it was absolutely factual that he wrote that letter, and I don't believe there ever was one, And so my thing is, as people that are supposed to be out there telling the truth and leading people, we just can't afford to put half truths out there, even ourselves.
Right. And I have a tremendous admiration for you for having done that, because I know, I followed the Israel thing because, like I said, I've got friends who's got kids in the IDF, and I interview a lot of people there. I've been there. I think I understand the issue, and I know there are people who disagree with me, but I have seen that Albert Pike letter, if I wouldn't say 100 times on Twitter, over 1,000 times on Twitter since things erupted in Israel on October 7th.
But there never was.
So people who, honestly, Tony, who we would think of our allies, and I'm not going to go into names here, but so I listen on the Israel thing. I agree. You can make Israel an idol, and that's bad. But you can also use clever theology as a cover for rank anti-Semitism, and that's also bad.
Yeah.
So we got to kind of strike the middle ground of truth. But for example, people who on the Charlie Vector 019er treatment thing would be our allies. I see them propagating things all over the internet about, well, Israel started the war in Gaza so they could build a canal from Eilat to Ashkelon, And so I go back and I pull out, there was a proposal back in the 60s for a thing called the Ben Gurion Canal, but it proposed setting off 550 nuclear explosions to dig a sea level canal all the way. It doesn't even go through Gaza. And first of all, in today's world, can you imagine any government putting off 550 nuclear explosions, even if they're underground?
Yeah.
And in an area that's on probably the largest fault line in the world, the Great Rift Fault Line. And it would cost like $100 billion for what? It would cost $100 billion. And what would they get out of it? Well, they say, they're going to take all the Suez Canal revenue. Well, then look into that, okay? And so you look into it, it's $9 billion a year, and they might get half of it. So for $4.5 billion a year, they're going to set off all these nuclear bombs. It just doesn't make any sense. I guess what I'm trying to do is people need to analyze these things because they just don't make sense sometimes. But then people banding them around, and I can tell you, I've seen the Ben Gurion Canal thing 100 times on Twitter and YouTube and other places and other ones. They want to steal all the Palestinians' gas. It must be trillions. No, it's not trillions of dollars. It's actually about $4.5 billion of gas reserves off Gaza. And so it's just, it would only supply Gaza with gas for 10 or 15 years. So I just think people need to be very careful, because we should not, as people of God, as people who are concerned about the truth, we shouldn't be propagating all of these things. Research them and find out whether they're true. We shouldn't be doing misinformation.
Well, the thing is, John, people come from a certain objective perspective, and there are people out there that are so anti-Israel and anti the Jews that they'll look for anything under any rock that they can find to pin, any sort of evil against them. But you've got conversely other people that are so pro-Israel and pro the political, country and all of that they can't see any possibility that there could have been collusion or, evil intent on the leaders in Israel or people, within the military or whatever. And so they bend everything the other way. And it's like we've got to be able to stand back a little bit and go, well, these are all human beings on both sides of this conflict. They are mostly not Christians, or certainly not awake Christians. They follow their Islamic or their Judaistic or whatever they are. So they haven't got the spirit of Christ, Jesus, in them. So they're going to do human things. And we've got to be able to almost stand back and go, yes, God overarchingly has a plan and we're heading in a direction that God knows things is going to go because it's prophesied. But we don't have to be so pro one way or the other that we can't be objective about it.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, look, it's how many, well, I guess the question was to put it down to practical tax. And I know in my case, it's true. I married the greatest woman on the planet, but how many other guys in the world think they married the greatest woman on the planet? And so all of those things, all of them can't be the greatest woman on the planet.
Yeah.
But and so you sort of, so as a trial lawyer, when you're a young trial lawyer, you have to prove a case. And in our system in the United States, it's an adversarial system. So you come in, one side presents their part of the case, the other side presents their part of the case, and then somebody decides. Now, the problem is you don't have unbiased deciders anymore. You have a lot of bias built into the system. But the problem is, one of the best ways to build your case is to try to present the other guy's case. The problem sometimes when you're a young lawyer, though, is everything you see proves your point. Everything you pick up and read proves your client's case is correct. And we have a name for people who do that in the law, and we call them losers, because they lose perspective on their case. They're not able to look at these things objectively, and it's very hard. I mean, we're all humans, but sometimes you got to set aside those biases and step back and say, yeah, Israel in this case really did a wrong thing, or they're acting incorrectly in this case. But then, on the other hand, you should be able to say these Muslims did something wrong in this case. So it's a balance thing, and I agree with you 100%. But we got to be very careful about just throwing everything against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to look to wrap up pretty soon. But I mean, there's people out there that are, that say that, well, basically what Hamas did was totally justifiable, which I think is nonsense. And on the other hand, Hamas went in and did atrocities and all that. And so Israel has to have a response to that. But is their response proportional? Is it the correct response? That's where it becomes objective. One person's opinion says this, another one is that. So I think we have to be really careful. In the end, we're heading in a direction that is going to happen prophetically, whether we like it or not, or think we're right in how we view it or not. And we can't be so convinced that we have all the answers. That's what I think. And just be very careful that we don't spread, misinformation or disinformation, not the type that Davos people are saying, because theirs is the real disinformation. But we have to be careful we don't also spread half-truths and different things, or, sway people in a direction that's wrong. I mean...
So I don't know if Twitter thinks I need to be fixed, but my Twitter feed is a anti-Israel Jew hatred sewer every day. Just a flood of stuff coming through. And I read these people, and it's just they can't reason at all. It's
but they don't want
it's unbelievable.
They don't want to reason because they've already made up their minds, and you can do that on so many topics, not just Israel. People that have made up their minds, and it doesn't matter what argument you present, they're not going to change what their mind's made up on. Anyway, we'll move off that. Just to close up, John, it would be nice to finish off with something positive, perhaps. How do we, approach things as Christians and do this right?
Right. Even though I point out all these things, I do live a fairly normal life, but it may not be normal forever. And so I really think that it's important, particularly for Christians, that you try to get it, whether it's online or in person, you get involved in a community of believers and a support system. And I think we need to be very objective about what we're doing. I think people need to make some preparations, because the world 4 years ago this month is when all of this, 4 years ago, the end of January, was literally when everything broke loose on that virus. And we saw what happened to the world. The world changed, and the world has not recovered from it.
No.
And they've put a lot of Band-Aids on it. So listen, the only thing that I put hope in is that I trusted Jesus for my salvation. And I know that that gives me a glorious future. Doesn't get me out of problems here that might actually bring more problems, but I think we need to adjust our perspectives so that sometimes we get too concerned about our own comfort. And we ought to be more concerned about acting in such a way that God is glorified through our lives and what we do. And I just would hope and pray that people would get that perspective. And it's not easy. Believe me, it's not easy.
Yeah, that's great though, John. Okay, so just the last thing is, where do people find you online?
YouTube at Fellowship Bible Chapel, Rumble at Real FBC, website fbchapel.com. And we're getting very close to be putting up podcasts on Apple and other places, like audio versions of what we do and teach at Fellowship Bible Chapel. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks that'll be done. I've been working on that the last week.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, John. We'll have to make sure we don't leave it so long till we do another show together.
No problem. Look forward to it.
Cheers.
Thanks.
And folks, don't forget our website, aminutetomidnight.com. Make sure you subscribe to us there. And we do have articles as well as our videos that you can read on our website. We also have Rumble, BitChute, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube channels. So you can subscribe to us and find our videos there. But only on our website will you find the articles. And we do run A Minute to Midnight 100% by donations. As I always like to do, I want to say thank you to the people that do donate to us. It's very much appreciated. If anyone else wants to, you can donate at our website. And the music used I've written, played and recorded. So God bless. God willing, we'll be back with another show in a few days' time.